morning, everybody. My name is Marco Inglese. I am Associate Professor of European Union Law at the Department of Law, Politics and International Studies of the University of Parma. Today, within the framework of this MOOC, we are going to explore the principle of sustainable development in the European Union legal order. Please consider that this MOOC is one of the deliverables of the project called Food for Future. The project called Food for Future is a project run by our department. Food for Future has been financed by the Italian Ministry of Education and Research as an excellence project running from 2023 up until 2027. Table of contents. So what are we going to discuss today? At first, I will briefly introduce EU law and sustainability through a normative overview. Then we will shift our attention to the EU Green Deal, and I am confident that at least part of the people watching this MOOC are already familiar with the Green Deal, in order to assess how the principle of sustainability and the EU regulation on climate neutrality have been adopted by the European Union. And please also consider that the regulation on climate neutrality is one of the flagship legislative initiatives that the European Union pursued in the last few years. Then we will move to an evaluation of the farm-to-fork strategy and food sustainability, because as you should well aware of, there are very strict interrelationships between food production, food consumption and food sustainability with climate change. Last but not least, I will offer you some concluding remarks. The principle of sustainable development in the European Union legal order is firmly embedded in Article 3, Paragraph 3 TEU. As you can see from this picture, and you can see a temple because, we European Union lawyers, we love the pillar structure. Sustainable development is now a fundamental principle of EU law, and it is conceived around three pillars. Pillar 1 is economic prosperity, Pillar 2 concerns environmental protection, and Pillar 3 revolves around social progress and human well-being. Now, how those three pillars interact one with the other, that is a very important issue which has been solved on a case-by-case basis, both by the legislator on the one hand and by the judiciary. And when I refer to the judiciary, I essentially recall your attention to the General Court and the Court of Justice of the European Union. In this sense, three additional principles come into play. At first, the principle of integration, then how a legal basis is construed, especially for what concerns environmental protection, and last but not least, judicial application. This is why we often say that sustainable development is a cross-cutting principle for a resilient, inclusive and future-oriented European Union. Now, within the European Union legal order, there are several mentions of sustainable development. At first, in the preamble to the treaty, we can read that member states are determined to promote economic and social progress for their peoples, taking into account the principle of sustainable development. Then, Article 3, Paragraph 1 and 3, Paragraph 5 of the Treaty on European Union. The Union shall work for the sustainable development of Europe, and the Union shall contribute to peace, security, and sustainable development of the Earth. So, as you can see here, there is a shift from a regional dimension to a global dimension. Then Article 21, paragraph 2, letter F TEU. So the European Union should help develop international measures to preserve and improve the quality of the environment and the sustainable management of global natural resources in order to ensure sustainable development. So as you can see here, there is already this visible link between sustainable development, natural resources, and the environment. Article 11, the principle of integration that was mentioned a few slides ago. Environmental protection requirements must be integrated into the definition and implementation of Union policies and activities, in particular with a view to promoting sustainable development. Consequently, integration and sustainable development often go hand in hand. Article 37 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. Please pay attention, because after the entry into force of the Treaty of Lisbon in 2009, the Charter is now legally binding. A high level of environmental protection and the improvement of the quality of the environment must be integrated into the policies of the Union and ensured in accordance with the principle of sustainable development. Last but not least, Article 191, paragraph 1, TFU, Union policy on the environment shall contribute to pursuit of the following objectives. There are several objectives, but for the purposes of this very short presentation, we are going to focus on climate change, because as we have seen at the very beginning of this presentation, sustainable development, climate change, and food sustainability are strictly linked one with the other. The Green Deal. As I anticipated, I am confident that the Green Deal, as a communication delivered by the European Commission in December 2019, is pretty famous now, I have to admit. But the Green Deal is an integral part of this Commission strategy to implement the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. Indeed, the Commission will refocus the European semester process of macroeconomic coordination to integrate, so once again you can see this principle of integration, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to put sustainability and the well-being of citizens at the center of economic policy. And this recalls us back the picture with the 3 pillars of the sustainable development. The Commission will adopt a new, more ambitious EU strategy on adaptation to climate change. This is essential as climate change will continue to create significant stress in Europe, in spite of the mitigation efforts. Strengthening the efforts on climate proofing, resilience building, prevention and preparedness is crucial. Work on climate adaptation should continue to influence public and private investments, including on nature-based solutions. It will be important to ensure that across the EU, investors, insurers, businesses, cities and citizens are able to access data and to develop instruments to integrate climate change into their risk management practices. So, as you can see, the Green Deal, once again adopted in December 2019, paved the way for the EU regulation on climate neutrality. And please pay attention once again, because the Green Deal in itself pointed out the importance of integration, the importance to integrate, climate change within all the Union policies and activities. What about the link with food sustainability? The Green Deal goes on by saying that European food is famous for being safe, nutritious, and of high quality. It should now also become the global standard for sustainability. Food production still results in air, water, and soil pollution, contributes to the loss of biodiversity and climate change, and consumes excessive amounts of natural resources, while an important part of food is wasted. At the same time, low-quality diets contribute to obesity and diseases such as cancer. So what about this link? Sustainability affects also food production, because as we've seen in this slide, food production entails some so-called negative externalities, such as pollution and so on and so forth. But please pay attention, because within the concept of integration, we should also be aware of the need to protect humans' health, as the last part of paragraph 2.1.6 demonstrate. Going now to the EU climate regulation, Restal 6. This regulation respects the fundamental rights and observes the principles recognized by the Charter, in particular Article 37 thereof, which is the norm that we have already explored a few minutes ago, which seeks to promote the integration into the policies of the Union of a high level of environmental protection and improvement of the quality of the environment in accordance with the principle of sustainable development. The Union's and its member states' climate action aims to protect people and the planet, welfare, prosperity, the economy, health, food systems, the integrity of the ecosystems, and biodiversity against the threat of climate change. So, as you can see from those words, integration is alive and kicking in these few sentences. In the context of the United Nations 23rd Agenda, the Union and Member States' actions should be guided by the precautionary and polluter-pays principles established in the TFU, and should also take into account the energy efficiency first principle of the Energy Union and the do no harm principle of the European Green Deal. So, coming back to the pillar structure that I showed you at the very beginning of this presentation, you can see that the environmental pillar is very visible when the European Union legislates against climate change. Now, from climate change to food sustainability. The Farm to Fork strategy is another communication promoted by the European Commission and was adopted just a few months after the Green Deal. And the Farm to Fork strategy recognizes the link between environment, climate change, and food. The manufacturing, processing, retailing, packaging, and transportation of food make a major contribution to air, soil, and water pollution and GHG emissions, and has a profound impact on biodiversity. Food systems remain one of the key drivers of climate change and environmental degradation. A sustainable food system will be essential to achieve the climate and environmental objectives of the Green Deal, and those are the objectives that we have already explored a few minutes ago. This strategy supports the transition by putting the emphasis on new opportunities for citizens and food operators alike. But this is true in the internal dimension of the European Union, but the European Union is not a single actor. The European Union does not act in isolation, but the European Union will focus its international cooperation, so opening the gates to other actors on food research and innovation, with particular reference to climate change, adaptation and mitigation, sustainable landscape management and land governance, conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, nutrition and healthy diets, prevention and response to food crises, particularly in fragile contexts, resilience and risk preparedness, integrated pest management, plant and animal health and welfare, and food safety standards, as well as sustainability of its coordinated humanitarian and development intervention. So, as you can see also in the Farm to Fork strategy, the three pillars of the principle of sustainable development are very well present. Concluding remarks. How to wrap up all the information that I proposed you. In a nutshell, the European Union is seeking to respond to the interlinkages between climate change and food sustainability. However, scenarios rapidly change due to geopolitical tensions like wars, trade wars, and so on and so forth. The European Union is very keen on adopting, on endorsing a fundamental right-based and integration approach. This is why we strengthen the linkages between health, environment, consumer protection, biodiversity, and animal welfare. Because sustainable development and food sustainability, they are both concepts entailing a multifaceted assessment. The European Union shaped a broad legal toolbox. Several legal acts have been adopted, and all those legal acts, although we have only explored the climate neutrality regulation, are underpinned by the principle of sustainable development. Last but not least, the European Union is putting great effort in international cooperation, because never forget that the European Union never acts in isolation. On this, I conclude my presentation. I hope it has been interesting and useful, and I thank you for your attention.